Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to Brickyard. I'm Andrea Thompson, and today we are continuing on with our new series, Intersectional Poetica. This series allows us to get in depth with spoken word artists and focus on a diversity of topics. We had our mental health showcase in October. Now, this month, we are celebrating our Black History Month showcase with the work of legends of Canadian spoken word. And today it is my honor and pleasure to be chatting with Dr. Afua Cooper. Hi, Afua.
Hi, Andrea. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. Afua and I were just chatting before I hit record, and reflecting on the fact that we've known each other for a really long time. So it's nice to see you again and also catch up because you've been doing some phenomenal work since you were last here in Toronto. So for those
Thank you.
who don't know Afua, I'm gonna read your a little bit of your bio here. Co-founder of the dub poetry movement in Canada, Afua Cooper has written 13 books, 6 of which are works of poetry. She recently won the J.M. Abraham Atlantic Book Award for Black Matters, a book of poetry that explores Black life in the African diaspora. She was Poet Laureate of Halifax for the 2018 to 2020 term. Afua is also a recipient of the Portia White Prize, Nova Scotia's highest award for the arts. Afua Cooper is a full professor in the Arts and Sciences faculty at Dalhousie University. So, Afua, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
You're most welcome.
Okay, so to start out, I would love, because, as it says in your bio, you're a major force of the co-founder of the dub poetry movement in Canada. And I imagine there might be some people who still don't know what dub is. So could you give us a definition? What is dub poetry?
I always say that dub poetry comes out of reggae music culture. So whereas when you think of reggae, the music, dub poetry is the spoken word aspect of it. Traditionally, one could say that dub poetry or the dub privileges the drum and bass of the music, the do 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 do, and then the trap drums. But dub poetry as an art form, as a poetic form, incorporates rhythms, privileges the voice in many respects. Sometimes we, as the poets, we privilege nation language or the various creoles of the places where we are from. But dub is international, so you can do dub in whatever language that you speak. So it's music, it's rhythm, it's privileging the voice. Some people would also add that dub poetry always like or like to give a nod to politics. That dub poets love to talk about politics.
Yeah.
That is true, but one doesn't necessarily have to talk about politics in dub poetry. So dub poetry, yes, it's spoken word, but I would also like to add the term vernacular there, because when we started doing dub, it was certainly coming from vernacular cultures that were marginalized, not mainstream. And in my case, coming from Jamaica, coming from the background of Africa, coming from enslaved people, and so much of my effort has been to put this vernacular at the center of my poetic discourse.
Beautiful. Okay, so would you say it's fair to say, even though it's a form that can be practiced and is practiced all over the world, that its origin is Caribbean?
Its origin is Caribbean.
Yeah.
Its origin, more specifically Jamaican,
Okay.
and of course influenced by African Jamaican culture, and music.
Nice. Okay. So what about you personally? How did you begin your career as a poet?
I could say I began my career as a poet in in primary school. I went to primary school in Kingston, Jamaica, and one of the activities we did, Friday was poetry day.
Mm.
So the previous Friday, you had to learn a poem, you had to memorize it, then you had to come the next Friday and recite the poem in front of class. Friday was kind of a chill day in school, and so the teacher, so we did poetry, we did kind of different activities, running, that sort of thing. But you had to memorize a poem and then recite it to the class. Additionally, we were encouraged to create our own poems, to
Nice.
write our own poems. And I had a teacher who, whenever I create my own poem, she would send it to a children's magazine in Kingston called the Children's Own, OWN. So I have several of my poems published in the Children's Own by the time I was 11.
Wow.
I wish my family had kept those newspapers, because
Oh
I'd
yeah.
love to see what I sent to them. I can't remember the poems I sent, but as I went through high school and then college, I started writing seriously, or thinking that I could write poetry. I could be a poet. So that's how that started. And then when I came to Canada in 1980, and sort of was looking around, for a place to land, I started reciting my poems at various venues in Toronto. I came to Toronto, so some of the places, there was a place called the Fallout Shelter, there was El Macombo, there was a Bamboo
Mm.
Club, there was
Elmo.
a Danforth Music Hall, and
Mhm.
there was a little restaurant called Strictly Ital. It was on Dundas Street by Spadina there, and it was Ital food. Some Rastas owned the restaurant, and they used to have poetry shows with drumming. So I started working a lot with drummers, more specifically the Gaia Prism drummers. So I was doing spoken word with the drumming, and we did some tours around Ontario. We went to Winnipeg. Um, we went to, I think we also went to Vancouver. So that was how it started, and it was, sort of the drums came to me naturally. I was a poet that worked a lot with African drums, and so that's how that started. And then in 1983, I published this little slim volume of poems that's almost 40 years now, called Breaking Chains.
Mm.
And that was such a gem. It was such a treat to have this little book, and just going about the place and reading, performing at numerous community events, and within also the university circles. One of the things I think most poets will say at that time, and still to this day, is that universities gave us a space, especially, the student union
Yeah, yeah,
of the
yeah.
university. So I went all over the
Mm.
place.
Mm. That's cool. Um, so I'm wondering, like, what in terms of the scene back then, I came on the scene in the 90s, and I've seen a big evolution, and especially in the last few years, a real willingness, and it's taken a long time because it began really begrudgingly, of traditional poets and the academy and kind of the powers of be in Canlit to recognize spoken word on its own terms. Did you, especially back then, like, have you felt or witnessed a kind of pressure or do you think even in general, that Black poets have had a pressure to write in a style that comes out of a more Eurocentric tradition rather than our own vernacular?
Yeah, certainly that was there, because I came on the scene in the 80s, and that was definitely there. Can lit the gatekeepers,
Yeah,
they sort of were there to bar the gate,
yeah.
and also the more established publishers. So myself and many other people, we self-published. We did our own book. We found a printer. We had someone to copy edit it. And we did that. It was mainstream poetry was not a welcoming place. And so when I said we performed on university campuses, it wasn't like English departments or, mainstream poetry inviting us. It was student union or the Black Student Association or, whomever, the Muslim Student Association or the Women's Studies Association. It was those groups of people that in many ways were also outside of the mainstream. But I want to say, what we're saying is true, how they were gatekeepers in terms of the Canadian literature world, but we created our own world. Like, it was like, I don't care. You're not going to make me feel inferior. This is my culture. This is my voice. This is my vernacular. This is how I'm expressing myself. I don't have to have a degree in English, and even if I had a degree in English, that would have been okay. That would have been fine too. I'm gonna write poetry because I think what happened to poetry in so many instances was that it sort of became imprisoned in the ivory tower. Because when you look at the roots of poetry globally, whether it's from Scotland, whether it's from Nigeria or South Africa or Indonesia, poetry was always connected to the voice, to music, to certain vocal traditions. If you think of, say, the bards of the United Kingdom who would sing their poetry, or the poets of Turkish culture who always perform their poetry with some form of musical instrument, like a two-string guitar or something. And, I was looking at some traditional Turkish poets, and they were singing the poems. They were like singing. So globally, that was poetry. And then maybe 17 coming up, 18, 19th and 20th century in Europe, all of that changed, right? To become an academic sort of thing where someone read it and analyze it. From the African tradition, wherever in Africa, it doesn't matter where. But if we want to speak to West Africa, where we have the tradition of the griot, and they too were singers of the word. In fact, among the Mandinka people, they call the griot guardian, the guardian of the word, because the griot was the poet and the historian, the keeper of knowledge, the knower of tradition. It's just fabulous. So that's what I draw on in my work, that, ancestral and also that spiritual tradition as keeper of knowledge, sometimes guardian of the word, but, the one who puts the word out there, kind of like the one who walks the word.
Yeah, that's so cool. And, seeing your trajectory, as an artist from those days to what you're doing now. I mean, I shared your bio, but I just want to let people know, and we're going to have the bio in the description box, but just to mention here some of the other things you've been up to. You're the founder and past president of the Black Canadian Studies Association. You're a member of International Scientific Committee of Roots of Enslaved People for UNESCO, principal investigator of A Black People's History, which I was checking out today. What a fabulous resource. We're going to put that link below too. And really important. And you received a medal for outstanding contribution to Canadian history from the Royal Society of Canada just this year. So like a dizzying list of achievements and honors within the realm of academia, from like this roots beginning. So I'm wondering if, like, what I was curious about, what drives that passion? Do you feel like you're having to educate still academia about what's going on with Black people, Black poetry? Is it just a passion to share your knowledge and to do the research? What's the driving force behind all of this work?
I would say I was doing the work and I still do the work because I like it. I but when I think about it, I thought, okay, so this is my purpose because I've been doing it and I've been consistent. So this is my purpose.
Yeah.
And I love doing it ever since I was a kid growing up in Kingston. From I was about age 16, I knew I wanted to do a PhD in high school.
Okay.
I said, okay, I'm going to do a PhD.
Mm.
And I wanted to do it in history. So that was very, very clear. And I also wanted to be a poet. So recently I was saying to my younger daughter, I said, whoa, I'm actually living my dream.
Yes.
When I was a kid, a teenager, that's what I said I wanted to do.
That's beautiful.
And then it dawned on me maybe 5 years ago. I'm like, oh my God, that's what I'm doing.
Sweet.
So
Sweet.
without like a major organized plan, things sort of just unfolded because that was what I wanted to do. And it happened. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I was able and still continue to do this work. And I just think I'm blessed. I see a lot of blessings there in terms of where I was born, to whom I was born, like my parents, and the context I grew up with, in my aunts, my uncles, my large extended family, living born in a rural place in Jamaica, a place called Westmoreland, but then I was growing up in Kingston, which was a city. So having both experiences, urban, rural, and then just having a huge family, huge, especially on my mother's side. And there were so many storytellers in that family.
Okay. It's in the blood.
Yeah, my mother's too, but my mother had a tremendous family. My mother had something like 11 siblings.
Wow.
And my father only had 2 siblings. So you can see her side was much larger than his. But my father's mother, Georgiana Cooper, she was a gifted storyteller. And she told us, the grandkids, a lot of stories, not folk tales or fairy tales. No, she wasn't into that kind of thing. She was into like real stuff, like this is what happened then. When I was 8 years old, we had this massive hurricane, and she told us about the hurricane and how them house blow down and that kind of thing. And they had to be walking and the rain was beating on them. So real stuff. And she also became a widow at an early age. She was 29 years old when she became a widow. So we never knew my grandfather because he died way before we were born. In fact, my grandfather, her husband, when he died, she was pregnant with their 3rd child. So my uncle, Bing, never knew his father because he was in belly when his dad died. So my grandmother would tell us, tell us about our we know so much about our grandfather, even though we didn't know him. And I think that was her way of sort of preserving his memory and letting us know that we had a granddad, even though we don't know him, what he did, what he liked to eat, how he planted roses, how he built the cottage that they lived in, that sort of thing. So she was, and we just loved to hear those stories about whatever historical event, the riot in 1938. And then my mother's sister now, on her father's side, they were also great storytellers too, about the family tradition, family lore, family legends, family mythologies. And 2 of them migrated to England, and stories about that. One of my aunts, she said, oh, one of the aunts who migrated to England, she was 19, she didn't have any money, and she went downtown and she borrowed money from somebody, and she took a ship and went to England, that sort of thing. So we're hearing all these stories. I just loved it. And so to me, that was a gift.
Yeah.
That was the blessing of these stories. That I grew up with, and somehow, some way, they're in my mind, and I distill them, and I think they come out as poetry. So, in many ways,
it's amazing. You know, I can really see you're doing what you were born to do, and also, you know, in a world history sense or global sense as well. It really seems like you're following this tradition of the troubadour where, you know, like the history keeper and the culture keeper and the artistry of the poet are colliding. I want to just go back briefly and ask you about something that you mentioned before, and something that I know is really important to you, which is I've heard you say that poetry is a spiritual experience for you. So I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about that in terms of how that plays in, or is it part of your process, or how does that work?
yeah. As I continue to write poetry and perform poetry, I became really connected to the spirituality of it, meaning that every word becomes important. Every word has a meaning, like no word is wasted, but also that in addition to that, poetry for me is an embodied experience. So when I begin to talk a poem or read a poem or perform a poem, it becomes a movement. It's physical. It enters my physical body, and it becomes something else. So the physicality of it adds another dimension to the poem. So it's not just the words on the page that I'm saying, or the words coming off my tongue. It becomes like its own universe. So that's what I mean. It's a spiritual experience. I feel that it's cosmic. I feel here's a connection between earth and heaven, or earth and the air, or something else. And I just experience it as a beautiful thing.
That's awesome. Um, so in terms of your process, how do you create a poem? How do you go from, you know, blank page or tabula rasa thought to a finished piece? How does that evolve?
That's an important question. And how I create a poem is, it's not the same for all the poems that I've written. So like the poem I'm gonna share with the audience, which is called Rara, Rara. That poem came to me when I was in Martinique in 2016 in the Caribbean. And I landed on the island at the beginning of Carnival in February. Carnival started that day. I didn't go to the island for Carnival. I went to the island to do a French immersion program. And then my host said, oh, it's Carnival. I had no idea because my mind just wasn't there. So anyway, everything shuts down, as you can imagine, for that week, for the next 10 days. And so I just went around the island, more in Fort-de-France, which is the capital. Not participated in the sense that I was in a band or anything. I just went, watched the bands, went to the concerts. You know, there were so many concerts, so many. Then there was a big street parade with all them. It was just incredible. So one of the things that struck me was the presence of the Rara bands. And these are, Rara is a culture originated from Haiti, by way of Dahomey in West Africa, or now the Republic of Benin. Okay. And you know, you've seen the film, the Woman King, which is from the story of the female warriors from Dahomey.
I haven't seen that. I will have to write it down.
Yeah. So it's Viola Davis. It's one of
Okay.
the hype films that just came out.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. So there are all these Rara bands. Some of them had come from Haiti. Some came from Miami, Panama, New York City, and Martinique itself and other places in the Caribbean. I don't know if any came from Montreal, perhaps, because there were so many of them. But Rara is culture, it's music, the performers, they'll have flags, they will paint, they'll have like a panorama of a painting that depicts something, could be historical or cultural or even present day. It could be like a joke on a situation, like a political situation. They'll love to mock politicians. So it could be a panorama of, some politician, corrupt politician or something like that. But oftentimes it's about a historical event. So you'll see Rara bands depicting indigenous people like Queen Anacaona of Haiti, who met Columbus when he came in 1492 and beyond, and she fought him. She fought the Spaniards. Or it could be, I remember one band having depicting a scene of slavery. So the slave masters, they painted their face white. Right. So these are all Black people, but they talk about black skin, white mask. So they painted themselves white to represent the slave masters. And then there are the slaves and someone with a whip, but there's always music, drummers, singers, dancers, just incredible. And so I just soaked that in, really soaked that in. And thought about it. And then one day I just sat down and the poem wrote itself.
Nice.
The Rara poem, taking in the history of Martinique and the Caribbean and Africa and slavery and music and the region before slavery and before colonization, when it was an indigenous space, and then the struggles between the indigenous people and the Europeans. But all the time, what drove the poem, the beat in the poem was a drum beat, drum beat of celebration, drum beat of culture, drum beat of war, because there's a lot of war going on, and drum beat of resistance. So I tried to put all of that together in celebrating Caribbean culture, in celebrating people's resilience, and that even in the midst of, horror, people still make art, people still make culture, people still make beauty or attempt to. So that's how that poem wrote. But there are other poems, I struggle with. I may have a line that will not yield anything. And then you just kind of have to let it be and then come back to it. And then, I will do exercises. I will do mental exercises, draw on my imagination. So if I have a poem like a world, let's say a phrase, a world greener than Eden. What does that mean? A world greener than Eden. And I have a poem with that title. Well, for me, as it turned out in the poem, that was my yard that I grew up in Westmoreland, Jamaica, and how my father and my grandfather before him planted up the place, planted bananas and yams and trees, ackee trees. So when I was growing up, we had this big farm behind our house, and everything was so green and lush and beautiful. So when I thought a world greener than Eden, that's what came to my mind, my yard that I grew up in, and how the men in my family made it green, made it Edenic, made it beautiful.
Well, I would love to. You gave us such a great introduction to the Rara poem. I would love to have the chance to hear it now. Would you like to share it?
Sure. So I told you what Rara is, and the poem is written in honor of the carnival in Fort-de-France, Martinique, and to the genius of the Asian people who created Rara. A sort of nickname for Fort-de-France is Foyal, Foyal. And I mentioned Queen Anna Kaona of the Taino people. In the poem, I also mentioned Toussaint Louverture, Dessalines, Christophe, Cécile, Fatima, who were heroes of the Haitian Revolution. So a lot of it is just imaginative stuff. But that week it was like the island was just under the spell or under the command of the drum. It was insane. I've never heard anything like that. Lots of drumming. What is this I hear? 1,000 drums playing, rat-a-tat, rat-a-tat, rat-a-tat-tat-tat, and Max Roach conducting. Ratatam, 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 trap drums, djembes, and congos, and the voices of 100 archangels chanting into the wind. Ra, 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 ra. The drums scream the name of Dahomey, but this is Fort-de-France. Dahomey is on the other side of the ocean. What is this I hear? Rara drums awakening the city. A dog howls. I look through the window. He dives into the sea and disappears while swimming to the other side of the harbor. A cock, its circadian clock, recalibrated, crows at 15 minutes to midday. Rara rhythms have remade the world. But this is not Haiti. How come these Rara people are marching all over Foyal, sending vibrations into the earth, the air, the sky, answering secret rhythms with sacred rhythms? I'm sure they are not mortal beings, but a celestial horde on the march with Babatunde Olatunji. The sound of trap drums. Sa, sa, yeah, in up to the hills, to Didier, Montartenson, to Trenel, even up to the Balata Road, way past Tivoli, to the volcano named Montpellier, and from the peak of the hill, the drummers and trumpeters look down onto the ocean, look way past the horizon, and beat their thoughts onto the air, sending back the colonizer and killer Desnambuc to the deepest dungeon of France, recrowning Châteauyer, beating the martial rhythms for triumphant Kalinago, for triumphant Carib warriors, reversing the slave trade, stitching whole again Africa. And in the distance, from the direction of Lamantin, I hear the pounding of hooves. Doom, 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 doom. The earth trembles in unexpected bliss. I see clouds of brown dust spiraling into the sky. I feel the hot breath of panting steeds rushing toward the city. Somewhere there is a clash of cymbals, a gate opens, mounted men holding a landscape of Osafa flags rush through. Sparks of fire rise from the horses' hooves. What is this? The cavalry, led by the fugitive slave named Matthew Leveillé? From the savannah, the drummers advance, beating on 1,000 drums, beating on horns, blowing their trumpets. bamboo sticks, beating bamboo sticks, shak, 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 maracas, shak, 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 not made by human hands. That's a taste of it.
Bravo, bravo. I could really see it was great when you described the embodiment, you know. So wait, am I here? Here I am. Yeah, so we got to see that embodiment come alive, and I love the pleasure that you get from sharing that poem. You know, when you said the word triumphant, I wrote that down. I'm like, triumphant. Your reading was triumphant. So I can't think of a better a better note to end this interview on. I want to thank you so much, Afua. It's been really sweet to see you. I haven't seen you for so long.
Yeah.
I get to share this time with you and share some of your words and your wisdom with the Brickyard viewers. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. It was my pleasure. And I look forward to doing the full set.
Yes, I was going to tell people about that. So, okay, so here goes my end of interview announcements. If you want to find out more about Afua Cooper, and there's so much more to find out, you can check her out at www.afuacooper.com. You can follow her on Twitter at Afua Cooper. All of this stuff is in the description box below. And we're also going to put a link for blackpeopleshistory.ca, especially this month. Check it out, an amazing resource. And we, as Afua said, we're going to have a full feature set of her work. So check back here to Brickyard. I think we're recording this in the past. So this is going to be in the future.
Yeah.
Posted. So I think we're going to post the interview first and then the feature. So check back for the feature if it's not up yet. And there's going to be more profiles during this Black History Month celebration as a part of the Brickyard Intersectional Poetica program. You can find out more about upcoming showcases by signing up to our newsletter at brickbooks.ca. And there's more information about Brickyard there. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I know it's a cliche everybody says, but for reals, we're trying to monetize this channel and we need you. We need you. So please subscribe and tell your friends to subscribe. Get your grandma to subscribe. Everybody, your dog, well, your dog probably can't, but you know, everybody else who you know. And we can keep this channel alive and hopefully get some profits happening that we can share with the artists that we feature.
Yeah, so, no starving artist business.
No.
Done with that.
No, we're not about that at all. Yeah. So thank you again, Afua. And thanks so much to everybody watching and checking out the Brickyard interview series. I'm Andrea Thompson speaking to Afua Cooper. And until next time, see you later.
See you guys later. Okay, take care, Andrea. Bye-bye.